Hi, this is Lori, and these are some comments about the PowerPoint on general research and news literacy. This week you are working on finding just some general information about the client, or at least one of the clients that we are representing. And I'll start first by acknowledging that for general internet research, you are likely going to begin your research with a search engine. Search engines you can consider them like a highway to information. These on the slide are considered the 10 top search engines, but most of us are generally using Google or Bing. Again, it doesn't matter which search engine you use, they are going to get you to your destination. You're not even sure what your destination is, but the search engines will get you there. Do know, especially if you are a Google user. I'm a Google user. There are advanced ways to use Google, and if you have a Google account, you can set up alerts. You can be able to organize your resources in a different way. So think about also how to use the advanced features of Google, which is going to assist you with narrowing down your research efforts. As you begin to research on the internet, do know that when you find websites, you will have to discern, determine whether or not the website you're going to use is credible. Now, some of you know, like if you are at a .gov, that's a government website. Only government entities can obtain a .gov. If you are at a .org, that's going to be an organization. A .biz is going to be almost anyone can own a .biz. A .edu is going to be owned by an educational institution. A .com is very general. You're going to have to be more cautious if your website ends in a .com, a .info, a .net, and so forth. Your domain extensions, and that's what these are, .gov, .org, and so forth, does give you a little clue on the credibility of the website by the nature of the domain extension. However, a lot of our research will be found at a .com. And then if you're at a .com, you'll have to determine, is that a business? Is that an individual? You'll have to try to determine who was the host of that website to discern the credibility. Let's talk about what is news. We are in an era that we get information now from so many resources: print media, TV, social media, and the internet at large. And we're also in an era of discerning perhaps what is news versus what is an opinion versus what is just general comment. News is standard, objective, fact-based reporting on a current matter of public concern. News is not commentary. So when you are evaluating a blog or review site, that is commentary versus if you are reading and getting information from a reporter from The Economist or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Crane, and so forth. So you want to also discern what is news reporting versus what is actual commentary. We are probably more bombarded with commentary rather than news if we are following social media or even watching cable news channels. You may find that much of that now has become more commentary versus actual news. So now we're in an era of certainly exploring and making sure that we understand that what news literacy is, and obtaining skills that we are able to discern for ourselves what to rely on when we're researching outside of legal resources. When you're researching statutes, case law, rules, and regulations, you know those are primary sources of law. But the practice of law involves a lot more information, sometimes more information than primary sources, because when we are representing clients, we're dealing with facts and fact finding. So news literacy, the ability to use critical thinking skills to judge the reliability and credibility of news reports and information sources. So that's part of this assignment. You're working on your news literacy. I have you finding both news and other information relevant to our client Airbnb. But you are sharpening your news literacy skills. Questions to ask yourself when reading or listening to a piece of information. What type of content is this? Is it news? Is it an opinion? Is it raw information? So is it news, for example, that this is the first term for the current president? An opinion that this first term sucks, or that the current president is the best president that we've ever had. Those would be opinions. Raw information is something very similar to the news, in that raw information, for example, the current president is the 45th president. It's not an opinion, it's fact. An interview, you know what an interview is. A reporter then asks a set of questions and obtains information. Some of that information can be considered raw information. If you're listening to it as the person responding is giving the responses. An advertisement, we've all seen them. Propaganda, which is similar to advertising, but propaganda is slanted to inflame emotions and to perhaps further confirm biases and beliefs that we all already have. Propaganda usually has false information in it and misleading information. Advertisement, though, generally does not have false information and misleading information, but is shaped to persuade us. Propaganda is shaped to trick us. And then, of course, there's entertainment. You also want to think about who is the author and the producer of the information. That may help you understand whether or not it's advertisement versus propaganda versus an opinion piece. Think about who are the sources cited and are they credible. So if you're reading an article written in the New York Times and they're referring to individuals, who are those people that they are referring to? Who is the actual reporter? If they're discussing a political official, then you want to also think about whether or not the political official's comment is raw information versus news, or even if it is propaganda. Is that person an expert in the field versus an eyewitness on the scene? And even eyewitnesses on the scene can lack credibility or have credibility. They are only limited to what they have seen. So if we have 10 eyewitnesses, each of them likely saw something different, and their accounts may be extremely different to the extent that we may think that one is more credible than the other. Eyewitnesses, though, are limited to their own ability to observe information. If researcher reports a reference, what organizations and what background information is offered. If you doubt what you are relying on, then continue to investigate. So where are we getting our news? Newspapers and magazines, websites, blogs, apps, radios, podcasts, television, social media, all different outlets. So for example, I read the Wall Street Journal, I read the New York Times, I read the Chicago Tribune. I do listen to things on CNN. I do sometimes follow news information on Twitter. My Facebook is generally family and friends, but lots of information, I want to say more propaganda than news, pops up in my Facebook feed, unless it's Facebook accounts that I purposely follow. Like, I'm a big fan of Charles Blow. He's an opinion writer, though, for the New York Times, so I know that that is his opinion, but I do follow him. I am a fan of Anderson Cooper, so on Facebook I follow him. So I tend to believe that what he posts for his page has some credibility, but I also have to explore whether or not that he, in his reporting, has some bias. I occasionally read resources that are opposite to my views so that I can see what the other view is, or how someone is explaining something. So I was saying, so I know you heard a little phone ringing there, that I sometimes read information or listen to information that is opposite to my own views so that I become more aware of what those other views are. And it sometimes helps me challenge my own beliefs and views. By the nature of the practice of law, that's what we get used to learning about the other side and appreciating varied views and the validity that they may have, and also acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses of both sides of any particular discussion. How to spot fake news. Again, this is kind of highlighting what I've already talked about. Consider the source, check the author, check the date. So, for example, yesterday in my news feed on Facebook, several people had posted articles that were rather inflammatory, but they were a year old too. So yes, they're inflammatory, but to continue to repost them is not really effective. So also check the date of what you're viewing. Check your own biases. Check the biases of the information you're receiving. Read beyond the headlines. We all know that very often things that show up in social media, people read the headlines and then comment. Or we ourselves read the headlines and believe the headline without looking further into the actual reporting itself or researching beyond that to see if that information is really true. Look for supporting sources, and if it sounds too crazy, it probably is a joke or what could fall under propaganda. So think about if it just sounds crazy, it probably is. And then ask experts. Go to fact-checking sites like Snopes.com or I think it's Facts Politico. They're different fact-checking sites. That those sites try to check facts and confirm them or not confirm them. Or ask a librarian for assistance, depending on your research. This particular slide is an attempt to show to what extent resources are biased. We are all inclined to follow resources that support our own personal biases. But this slide was put together by a news outlet to try to demonstrate to what extent resources are right-wing bias, I should say, versus left-wing bias. So I mentioned that I am a New York Times reader, but I have to know that the New York Times in its reporting leans to the left a little more, for example, than the Wall Street Journal, which leans a little bit more to the right. So I read the Wall Street Journal, I also read the New York Times. I probably watch CNN far more than I might check in to see what Fox News is reporting. But I have to be aware that CNN is left biased, reputable, still a reputable resource, but left biased. Fox News is bordering right biased, but it's also bordering reputable and questionable reporting. If I follow the U.S. news, or you're watching NBC News, CBS, PBS, I forget I watch PBS sometimes, or Chicago Tonight, or I listen to NPR, some of the sources that I listen to and follow, their centered bias and tends to be balanced. So one of the things you want to consider, even for your personal life, is if you are a fan on either side of this bias, if you are following a constant watcher of Fox News, then occasionally you might want to follow something on MSNBC and then check in with CBS News or PBS NewsHour and see. Then you have two biased reportings and then one that is center biased. If you only stay on one side, your views are probably going to be very shaped to have a strong bias in one direction versus the other. Also note that this layers whether or not you should just avoid what's being reported here. Clickbait, just avoid. Minimal, use rarely as a resource. Good, which means you can often rely on these resources. And analytical, your go-to resources for analytical news. So The Economist, C-SPAN. I would have thought that the Wall Street Journal would have been up there, but it's not. So these are kinds of tools we just want to be mindful of in how we use our resources. This slide is just to give you some ideas of if you're trying to find review sites, because part of your assignment this week you are working with review sites. So there's TripAdvisor is a very popular one that I use just to go in and check for different reviews on almost anything. It's not just for trips. People give reviews on hotels, on Airbnbs, on restaurants, on tourist attractions, and so forth. But you get the idea. These are various websites that you would find reviews about different goods and products and services. Corporate information. Since we are representing Airbnb is a corporation. It's good for students to learn about how to access corporate information. Corporations are public entities. I should say they're not public entities. They're open to the public. So a corporation has to file articles of incorporation. They have to make their information about their company public record because of their shareholders' interest. So if you are working with a client that is a corporation, certainly you're going to get information from the client, but we also should be aware that there are databases that we can gather information. If you're also interested in what companies you like and what policies they support, and if you're a stockholder and so forth, you want to know about the companies that you are investing in or purchasing from. One of the main services is Hoover's, and you have access to Hoover's through the College of Lake County Electronic Library. Hoover's is a protected database, so you can't go directly to Hoover's on the internet in general and access it. You will have to go to it through our CLC website. So I have set up, at least I thought I did, we move this over. So if you go to CLC website and get to the electronic databases alphabetized by H, we have Hoover's, and then once you click the Hoover's link, it's going to take you to a web page that looks like this, Mergent Intellect. And then you would type in the company that we're interested in. So if I'm looking for Airbnb, I find that here's Airbnb Incorporated. And if I click on that, it then allows me to get information about Airbnb. So I can get company details. It tells me about the company. I can get linked to news events. Financial details. This is especially important if we were suing Airbnb for some sort of damages. Actually clicked on the link there. We wanted to know their value. We can get information about the financial part of Airbnb, their employee sites, how many employees they employ, their sales volumes, and so forth. Industry details. This is where we learn more about the industry that they are in. Executive details, if we're looking for information about who their head people, who their executives are. So I think you get the idea of if you're researching what is commonly referred to as Hoover's, you can find out information about that company. It takes you to their website. Their website is going to have lots of information as well, but it's going to be additional information than what is found here. This is more legalistic information, if you will, as it relates to the company itself. This would be a service certainly someone would use if they are so you see lots of things happening on my screen, and I'm actually not going to delete some of that. But now you know that I'm taping in real time, if you will. So that's what I have about Hoover and how you'd want to use that information or use that service to learn more about Airbnb as a company. All right, this week you are working on the factual research portion of our assignment. So for Airbnb, you're going to get some general information. You're doing an inter-office memo to me. So this is an assignment that would be for the office itself. So it's an inter-office memo. This should not exceed 3 pages. This is a way of getting some information about the company in general. One, we want to know what is their current policy for anti-discrimination. So you want to have your first starting place with the company itself and see have they posted any anti-discrimination policies. And if so, you want to summarize them. And if it's too much, you can generally summarize and then provide a hyperlink to the policies itself. So no need to rewrite everything that we can readily access. Remember, in the law office, we don't want to spend more time on tasks than we have to. So if you found that they have 3 pages of anti-discrimination policy information, of course you don't want to rewrite that, but maybe give some highlights and then provide a hyperlink to that information. You also want to review various review sites and news stories to determine if there is any information about discrimination that involved Airbnb during the last 5 years. So probably keep this to 5 to 7 sources. And again, this is more you linking, giving maybe a general description of the information and then providing a hyperlink to the source itself. So this assignment doesn't involve you writing a lot of information, but providing links to information that will become necessary for us to represent Airbnb. And the reason I said do not exceed 3 pages is because some of you may find more resources with respect to linking us to that information. But I don't expect that this is going to be a lengthy assignment with respect to the writing portion. So again, you want to summarize, which really means no more than a paragraph or 2, and then make sure that you use hyperlinks. And in using your hyperlinks, please make sure that you don't include the full URL, but that you link a term or phrase, or even an image, to the URL. That makes the writing look much cleaner. So I hope that highlights and explains what you're working on this week. Again, the primary goal here, one of the spirit of this assignment, is to have students appreciate using the internet at large on gathering information that's relevant to clients and what we do in the law office to represent some of our clients. And then sharing this information with the office. And in the office, we would begin to pull this together and sort of build a database of information about our clients. So that's what you're doing for this week. I hope it clarifies any questions that you may have. If not, please contact me and have a good week.